So I'm supposed to stay right in this circle. That's what they told me. So I'm excited to be here and participating tonight. My talk is Communicating from the Heart. Before we start, I just kind of like, in honor of Steve Jobs, wanted to wear black in his collar. Got my hair cut a little bit like Steve. The only difference is his bank account's a little bigger than mine. So I'm going to share with you a little bit of my heart, and let's get going. So once upon a time, there was a man, Robert Edward Evans Sr. No wonder his son was a photographer. And Terry Ann Moser, my mother. And they met on January 23rd. They got married. And they had a wedding cake, like most people do. And they set out on their life and headed out to California. They were married in Lafayette, Indiana, where both of them were from, Indiana area. And 44 years ago today, this bundle of joy was born. Thank you. And so, like most proud parents, little Robbie, their joy. And I was my mother's, gleam in her eye. And then at 11 months old, tragically, my mother died in a plane crash. So that Christmas and many Christmases after that, it was just me and my dad. But I grew up, like most little boys, playing, getting haircuts. My dad took this picture. This is one of my favorite photos that my father took. It's just so great. I even love in the cash register, it says 25 cents. My dad did remarry Barbara Wood, or Barbara Evans, which she still goes by. And I have a half-brother. He's 2 years younger than I am. And we were with each other for a little while, but then they divorced. And my father and I moved to Atlanta, Georgia for his job, hopefully not in fashion. But I continued to grow up. And the one thing that we did do is that my grandparents had a lake house in Indiana. And every summer, from when I was 5 until I was about 18 years old, I went there. And so this is my dad and I there, and he would take me there. And these are my grandparents, Lloyd and Helen Moser. My grandfather was an architect, and my grandmother is a housekeeper, or house breather. But that was my absolute passion as a kid, going back to the lake every single summer and spending time with my grandfather. And then one day when I was about 8 years old, in April I came home and the babysitter told me that my father was in the hospital. And 2 days later, my aunt showed up, my father's sister. And about 11 days after that, my father died. So here I was, 8, and no parents. I mean, at the time, young enough to not understand it even today when I think about it. I'm happy that at least if it was going to happen, it happened then instead when I was 16 or 18, when I was even closer to my father. But basically, we packed up all my stuff, drove back to California where Diane lived. There was a custody battle between her and my grandparents because my grandparents really wanted me. And she won the custody battle being a single parent and being gay. But I continued to go back to my grandparents every summer and do what I love to do, fish, which is what I had an absolute passion for. I did things that every little boy did. Boy Scouts, I played sports and baseball and kept going back to the lake, and as I got bigger, the fish got bigger. And this is me in junior high and high school. And about high school, my life significantly changed in that 2 things happened in my life. I started practicing Buddhism, and the way I got involved in being Buddhist is Diane actually started practicing Buddhism when I was about 11 months old, or right before I was born, actually. And Buddhism basically is common sense if I were to put it into 2 words. It's based on cause and effect and karma. But basically when I was 16 years old, I was getting into a little bit of trouble. It wasn't serious trouble, but my mom, because I call her my mom, my aunt Diane, would ground me. But I wasn't listening to her. So she's like, well, if you're not going to listen to me, you have to go everywhere with me. And so I started going to these Buddhist meetings. And I'd been around it, but at that point I really just didn't think that I would be religious. But I started going to the meetings, and people would talk about, I chanted Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, and I got a car, and I got this, and I got that, and I got a better relationship. And there was a big part of me that didn't want to be there, but there was a big part of me that was intrigued about this chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo and getting stuff. I was 16, so I was very attracted to the material things. So one of the first things, I decided that I would try it to prove to her that it didn't work so that I didn't have to do it. But I still had it in the back of my mind that I thought it would. So I started chanting for a job. They suggest that you make a list of the things that you want, and you can be as detailed as you want, and give it a try for 30 days, like a science experiment. You didn't even have to believe it. I was like, okay, well, I don't have to believe it. I just have to try it, so I'm going to do it. So I made my list, and I started chanting for a job that I made $6 an hour under the table that I didn't have to look for, because I was painfully shy. And of course, I didn't want to be told no. None of us like rejection. So anyway, I started chanting that, and after about 2 weeks, I was talking to a lady at one of the meetings, but nobody knew what I was chanting for, and she just started talking to me, and she said, "What do you do?" "I'm a student." She's like, "Do you have a job?" And I said, "No, I don't." She said, "Do you want a job?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "Well, my husband puts in linoleum tile floors, and his helper just quit. This was a Friday night, you could probably start tomorrow, and he'll pay you $6 an hour under the table." And I was like, I'm in. So basically from that point on, I was like, okay, well, I'll keep doing this until it stops work. 27 later, I'm still chanting. The one thing, like the statement says right here, that we transform Buddhism, like you transform your own life, and then in a sense, you change your environment. So it's a very big part of my life, and I really enjoy it. I mean, it's given me compassion, set goals, care about other people, and I really think, if I hadn't had this in my life, I could be one screwed up kid. Photography was the next thing that I started in high school. It was the one thing that I really liked, that I found passion in. And so, this is one of my dad's photographs, actually. He liked photography, so it was like kind of the one thing that inspired me. I'll read this so those in the back of the room can't see it. Creativity means pushing open the heavy groaning door of life itself. Indeed, it may be the most severely challenging struggle there is. For opening the door to your own life is in the end more difficult than opening the door to all the mysteries of the universe. And I just thought that was interesting with me starting Buddhism and photography. So this is me in high school, in my high school photography class. Here's some of my high school work. This is the pier that I fished on at my grandparents' lake as a little boy. I always didn't quite understand homeless, and I sort of had a fascination of taking pictures. This was taken in Hollywood. And in the spirit of being here today, I brought my favorite tiger photo that I took at the zoo. I actually turned this in my class, and my teacher kind of frowned, but I did get a B- on it. And it wasn't until about January of '89 that I shot my first wedding. But to back up a little bit, I worked in a color lab for a year, and then I worked for 3 studios before I started my own business. But I shot my very first wedding on my own. I didn't want to be a wedding photographer. I mean, at 19 years old, it's not cool, and especially back then, wedding photography wasn't cool. It wasn't the art that it is today. But it was the opportunity, and I took it. I just wanted to shoot pictures. So in 1994, right after the Northridge earthquake, I started my own business. I borrowed a bunch of money and just went for it. And I started taking pictures the way that I wanted to. And I take pictures today, like why do I do it or what do I look for? But I basically take photographs to touch the lives of other people. Yes, I shoot weddings, but even if I shoot my fine art or those things, I want to take a photograph that moves someone else, that touches their heart. So quickly, here's some of my wedding work. Telling a story, capturing a moment. Little girl, this was a park that I did down here in Orange County. This little girl walked into my shot. I always think that she's dreaming about, and she herself would get married. Just something creative, fun, emotional. A dad seeing his daughter for the first time. Grandma seeing her grandson for the first time. Dad wishing his daughter before she walks down the aisle. I love this shot. This is in Century City, and you don't even see this anymore because they built the building over the Dorothy Chandler. Is it Dorothy Chandler down there? but you don't see the Twin Towers anymore, it's blocked, or a bridesmaid reacting to her friend and her fiance seeing each other for the first time. And even in this shot, like I like this shot because even this guy over here, like I'm touching his heart and he's in the photo. You know, he's just enjoying watching these two play. So then Hollywood started calling. The first celebrity wedding I did, this is Duff McKagan from Guns N' Roses. Brad and Jen. I submitted my work for Brad and Jen not knowing who it was for. And I got the job and they didn't tell me it was. And then 2 weeks before the wedding, I heard it on the radio. I knew when it was and where it was. And I literally laughed, cried, freaked out. Like all these emotions came out. I was like, you have to be kidding me. And so I had 2 weeks to sort of adjust to it, but I did. Then 6 years later, the next big wedding, Tom Cruise and Katie Holmes in Italy. It's one of the shots from the magazines. This is Anastasia. She's a famous worldwide singer, not so popular in the States, but she sold about 50 million albums worldwide. Johan Griffin and Alice Evans. He's a British actor. Trent Reznor, 9 Inch Nails. Jim Carrey, I shot a holiday party for Jim and Jenny McCarthy. Christina Aguilera, I've done a birthday party for her and a Halloween party for her. In true TEDx fashion, this is Marissa Mayer. She's the #1 female executive at Google. Ian Ziering, for those of you old enough to know who he is. This is at Pelican Hill down here in Orange County. And this year, Shania Twain, January 1st. And in May, Miranda Lambert and Blake Shelton. And I've done many other little various ones on the way, but they only gave me 15 minutes to talk. So, I'm going to change it to TEDxIrvine, and then I'm going to have 20 minutes. So I, too, met the love of my life and got married January 27th in 2000. This is my wife, Amy. This is us on our wedding day. My aunt today, or 11 years ago. This man, Steve Coben, is, if I hadn't had enough loss in my life, I was best friends with his son in high school. 6 days after we graduated high school, his son died on a motorcycle. And I've always sort of been like a second son to him, and this is his toast when he's talking, and he's just a very important person in my life. And today, this is the family that I'm part of. So growing up not having a family, and having an amazing family today, these are my kids and my wife. But it's just one of those things that, like, you know, I didn't think that I'd have that, and I'm just blessed and fortunate to be part of it. So we communicate today, and my talk is communicating from the heart, but we communicate with email and text and Twitter and Facebook and all these social networking things. But I think what's happening is that we're becoming less and less engaged with each other because we don't communicate heart to heart anymore. You know, we use these forms, and I'm sure you all can relate to in a text or an email that we've all sent that your thought or feeling really didn't come through in what you meant to say. So there's, you know, hundreds and millions of people throughout the world, and there's a term that's called dependent origination, which means there's no two things in the universe that can survive on its own. And Conversely, like the same thing, like we all need someone, even this shot that I took, this bird in the park. So the one thing that I say that we need is my acronym is God, and probably not the God that you're thinking of, but the God I'm talking about is good old-fashioned dialogue. We need to communicate as human beings. As technology takes us further and further apart, it really should be called antisocial, not social networks. But good old-fashioned dialogue. So the first key to dialogue is it means that you have to engage. You have to, it says a human being needs to be among other human beings. Engagement with others forges our character and enriches us. We need to make an effort to meet people and interact with others and exciting possibilities. And meeting people stimulates our own personal growth and our energy and expands our world. Because if we stop talking to each other, then we're in trouble. And when you meet with others and share your thoughts and suffering, your infinite compassion and wisdom with your own heart will come forth, and your own life will be transformed. So dialogue really starts with a friendly greeting, and serve with a heart-to-heart exchange. I walk my kids to school. I live here in Orange County. I moved down here a couple years ago from LA. And I walk my kids to school every morning, and after I walk them to school on most mornings, I run. And I started, I run around this lake, and everyone's so they don't look at each other and they don't want to talk to you. So I play this little game that I say good morning to everybody that I go by. Well, good morning. And they look at me like I'm crazy sometimes, but they think they know I'm the guy now that says good morning. But it has to start with this, you have to make the first effort. You have to reach out to people and engage them, because if you don't, they're not going to do it either. So it's got to start with someone. Dialogue is an epic challenge which first requires us to change ourselves rather than to change others. And to inspire others, our hearts have to be alive and filled with passion and enthusiasm. So no matter what you do, no matter what your job is, you have to have passion and enthusiasm about it in your life. And passion inspires passion, and sincerity inspires sincerity. Genuine dialogue is a profound life-to-life connection. And dialogue starts with the courageous willingness to know and be known by others. It's a painstaking and persistent effort to remove all obstacles from common humanity. If you think about it, dialogue is what brings us together, and dialogue is what separates us. Lack of dialogue is why wars are started, why there's racism. So it's super important that we continue to connect. And when you dialogue and you can connect to the heart. Words spoken from the heart have the power to change a person's life. They can even melt the icy walls of mistrust and separate people and nations. And words spoken from the heart and filled with powerful wish for someone's happiness can deeply touch a person's life and revive his or her spirit, becoming a source of lifelong inspiration. And one person's heart can move another. And if your heart's closed, then so is theirs. So you need to open up your heart first. So dialogue is not you voicing your opinion or putting your opinions on other. Dialogue, the key to it is to respect, to listen, and to learn from the other person. It's a mutual exchange. Lively dialogue can be vigorous and satisfying. And the tone of voice that you use is important too, because the voice is what's alive, is what gives power to move and stir others. The feeling of tone in the voice enters through the ears and the gateway in the spirit, and it travels to the heart. Compassion comes out of dialogue, and you need to identify to have compassion. So a person in anguish can find peace simply knowing that there is someone else thinking about them. And an attitude of compassion does not mean, pitying someone. It really means putting yourself in their position and trying to figure out, even if you can't help them, trying to figure out to comfort and support them. And the final step is appreciation. A thank you is a miraculous expression in a very, we feel good when we hear it, and we feel good when we say it. And even just appreciating the things in our life that are good and that are bad, even appreciating our problems is a big help. So I want to say thank you for having me. And as you think of TED, ideas worth spreading, which is their theme, think of it in this way. If you want to touch the heart, you need to engage in dialogue. And that's what we think of TED as. And I'd like to change it a little bit. TED, touching the heart, one talk at a time. Thank you.